How's it going, guys? Kyle Brotherson here. This is the Dirt Bike Channel podcast, and I've got a very, very special guest today. I'm super excited. In studio, in-house, because it's the studio inside my house.
Yes.
I have Jay Clark here with me. Jay, say hello to the world.
Hello. This is great to be here.
It is great. It's great to have Jay here. Jay and I have just been reminiscing on the past and talking about his family life and my family life a little bit. And we are here in my little basement office here recording this podcast episode, so I'm super excited. Thanks, Jay, for coming all the way from California, because this is the only reason you came, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know Jay Clark, I don't know what rock you've been living under. No, just kidding. Jay Clark is the man. He lives you're in Sun City, California right now, aren't you, Jay?
Yep, which is Menifee is the actual name now. They like to call it, but I still like to call it Sun City.
Sun City. That's it's fun because the weather is always sunny in Southern California, right?
It is a lot. So
Sun City. So I'm gonna just introduce Jay here a little bit for some of you that aren't as well versed in what Jay's been doing. So Jay's been in the dirt bike industry for a lot longer than I have, many more years than I have. He started riding bikes in 1980. We're gonna get into a lot of this, but Jay has he's kind of the owner and the curator of Jay Clark Enterprises, which is this really cool company that he's built up, where he works with a core group of companies to help get them media coverage and exposure through a number of different channels, magazines and online and print and other types of advertising. A good example of one of the ways that he does this is he builds project bikes. You build a lot of project bikes, which we're going to get into. And you're doing that every month, and then you'll highlight, okay, look, on this bike we put on this part from Cometic Gaskets. We did a cylinder here. We did a piston from Vertex. And so we'll talk about that a lot. So he's built, dirt bikes. If you have been reading any magazine, I would say over the last 15, 20 years, any dirt bike related magazine, you have seen his handiwork. Is that right, Jay?
That's about right.
That's about right. You've seen the bikes that he has built, these project bikes, over a number of years. He also runs Dirt Bike Channel, or Dirt Bike TV, which is a channel on YouTube. You need to go check it out. He's got a lot of tips, does a lot of testing. You can find him at jclarkent.com, so jclarkent.com online. He's got his website there. And the thing that I feel about Jay, and I think I said this 3 years ago when I did a little tire change video with Jay, is that he has forgotten more about dirt bikes than I have ever known. And so it's a pleasure to have him in here to chat about dirt bikes. So I just wanted to thank you for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is kind of fun, and I'm looking forward to doing it.
Yeah. So, I've done this with a lot of the different guys and people that we've had on the podcast. So why don't you kind of briefly tell us what your first dirt bike was and how old you were, and maybe some of those early memories from your childhood there.
So my uncles both raced, and one of them was pretty good in the 70s as motocross, Vince Clark, and he was like number 44 in the nation, and it was kind of a big deal back then. And he actually just moved up here not far from where you live. And so he's old now and had both knees replaced, and he's got a dual sport. Okay. So that's what old guys do, is dual sport. So is
that a stereotype?
Yes.
Old guys go. I saw you did a video on that on your YouTube channel. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but
yeah, that's starting to take over, and that's a whole nother thing we could talk about. But as far as getting into riding, the first little bike was like a 4-stroke 125. I don't even know what it was, like a Honda, but that was the first bike I ever rode, and I couldn't touch the ground on it or anything. And from then on, I was hooked.
How old were you then?
So I was probably like 11, 10 or 11.
Okay. So a little Honda, you couldn't touch the ground, 10 or 11.
So then I got a 77 RM80, and from then I was just hooked and just loved it. And then from then on until I was an adult, I just battled keeping anything running because we didn't have a whole lot of money. So it was like, if it would you'd ride it as much as you could until it broke, then it would sit until I could afford parts and get it fixed.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. So is that kind of where you then started to develop the talent of working on things and wrenching on things and fixing them?
Yeah, back then I just did more damage than good. I remember breaking a main jet off in a carburetor as like a 12 or 13-year-old.
Just trying to get it too tight?
Not even close. So didn't know what I was doing. So I did more damage than good because I couldn't afford to take it to anyone. So I would just do the work myself, and then a lot of times just cost more damage than good.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because like the jets are brass, and so you're dealing with a steel or metal screwdriver, and then it's a brass screw in there. And I have stripped out pilot jets before, like trying to take them out. They're so tight. I don't know if McCuney and Kean, I don't know why they're putting them in with like impact guns, but I will get my screwdriver up in there and I can't turn the thing out. So
yeah, so I learned the hard way and a lot of that stuff. So it was a constant battle. And so when around later in the 80s, and we moved out to Missouri, and there was good land there, so we could ride. So that was nice. But again, single mom income, and so didn't have a lot of opportunity to be able to ride like I wanted to. Once I got to high school and I was working, I could go. I went to a few races, so I raced maybe, I don't know, 10 or 12 times through all my teen years, and thought it was pretty cool. Was never very good at it, but I kind of thought I was and dreamed I could be. But I kind of stuck to football, because football, you didn't have to repair anything as far as being able to do it. It was basically free to play football.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that a lot. Like, I get questions from kids. In fact, I had a question on email today from a kid, and he's like, "Hey, look, I love the fact that you give dirt bikes away because I can't afford one." Oh. And I get those multiple times a week, and kids will say, what can I do to afford a dirt bike? And honestly, it's really tough, because if you don't have your parents to help you as a kid, it's almost impossible to make as much money as you need to make to buy a dirt bike. And I, as discouraging as that sounds, it's true to some extent. I couldn't really afford my own dirt bike until I was 29 or 30. You know what I mean? And that didn't mean I didn't have some four-wheelers and stuff when I was growing up, but money was tight with my family, and we didn't have nice new things. We never had any of the newer toys. You know what I mean?
And you bring up a good point. I get hit up about this a lot. And so when guys get into me, I kind of try to steer them towards stick and ball sports if they can afford it. I mean, because if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So I don't think you should be, especially chasing the racing dream. A lot of them want to chase the racing dream, and I go, man, don't be like second mortgaging your house and all this stuff just so you can go race or ride. I think you're better off doing that stuff, and then wait until you can afford to do it right.
Yeah. So, and I totally wholeheartedly agree with that. So I want to kind of talk about the transition between because it sounds like you were a lot like a lot of kids in when they're growing up in dirt bikes. See, I didn't grow up with dirt bikes, so I never had this this goal that I was going to be a dirt bike racer. I thought I was going to be a jet fighter pilot, because I grew up watching Top Gun, and then I figured I was going to be Maverick or whatever. But so you kind of grew up with dirt bikes as part of your life, and so you had that goal, like, or this dream, maybe is the better way to put it, that I'm going to make money racing or riding dirt bikes. And then, like most of the rest of the world, that kind of didn't pan out for maybe a number of reasons. But I want to talk about the transition between, okay, you're saying I'm not going to make it in riding dirt bikes as a racer. So, but then you found a way to kind of make a living in the industry in a totally different way. Can you talk to me about that transition, how that came to be? Because you've been, making a living in dirt bikes for a long time, and it isn't about the racing aspect of it. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay. So it's a really good question. And so I never really, I guess, thought I could. And even today, I kind of have to pinch myself or go, hey, I still do this. This is cool. So once I got out of high school, I was a machinist, and I worked quite a few machinist jobs. And when I moved back out to California, the aerospace was still alive and well for just a little bit. And I was able to get a lot of machinist jobs, and they were pretty good. So it actually afforded me to be able to get back into dirt bikes. I went a while without having any, and I was able to buy my own dirt bike through just being a machinist. Got an RM250.
How old were you?
So back then I was like 21.
So you were starting to make some decent money.
Yeah. So you could get on your own feet, and then I could afford at least a bike payment. I don't recommend that, but yeah, that's what I did. You know what though? A lot of us started that way. Yeah, and there are guys that still have to make that payment. Because in hindsight, like nowadays, it's like, man, I wish you could just. I think you're better off buying a bike you can afford to buy, even if you have to fix it up and not have those payments, I guess. But
that's the whole prudent living. So now you're a machinist. You've got a dirt bike, and how do you transition into like, wait, I can make money in this industry? Because I think there are hundreds of thousands of guys out there thinking that they could do the same. How did it look? How'd that work for you?
Well, it kind of started the day after I got home from my honeymoon with my wife. I got laid off. And so that was pretty awesome. I come back to work and it was like, I was just newly married and I was like, oh,
Nightmare.
this is kind of gnarly. And then for the first time, I kind of struggled finding work. Took me a while because everything was kind of dying off. So I kind of struggled finding work. And so what I did was just started brainstorming about all these different things. I was trying anything to find good work. And I found some part-time stuff and everything. And then I hit up Wiseco. I knew the company from...
The Pistons, right?
Yeah, Wiseco Pistons. And they're based in Ohio, but they had a warehouse in California. And so I knew the guy there, and I talked to him, and then he gave me a good word to the people in Ohio. And I hounded on him for like 6 months. Like I would call him and go, hey, you guys don't have anybody out west here representing you guys. You guys need somebody that's out here that can help you with the race teams and do different things. And of course, it wasn't really even thinking about project bikes or things like that, really. It was just thinking of a way to help promote their brand out west. And since they're in Ohio, they're kind of, you're out of sight, out of mind. And this is before internet. And, so it was like, this is in the like 92, 93 range. And so it was before there was if you were in Ohio, you were forgotten about.
Yeah.
And so when I, finally kind of got through to them, they flew me back there for an interview after I met one of the owners out in California. He was out in California, met him, and he goes, hey, you should come out and meet our team in Ohio. Met him, and then I worked for them for 11 years, and they were great. And the owners, I'm still good friends with, the Andersons and Kipps, and Bob Gorman, he's the owner of Cometic. There are some of the great people, just amazing people, but they did sell the company. And once they sold the company, then I kind of saw that, hey, I need to look at doing other things as well. And so then, I was able to leave on my own after a couple years after they sold. I was able to kind of leave on my own, and that's what really opened things up a little bit more. But I'd still be with Wiseco today if they had never sold, because they were such a great company and a great family and people that run it, and everybody that worked there was just amazing.
That's cool. So your background as a machinist, that kind of opened the door to that. Were you making pistons?
So what happened was they did like that I was technical, but obviously everything was made in Ohio, but I could at least talk about the product with some knowledge. So when I would go back there, I could meet with the guys that do the designing, and I could meet with the guy on the dyno, and that's doing everything. And so then when I would go meet with the race teams, and back then we would be sponsoring Yamaha and Kawasaki, and they would want special pistons made. And I'm the one that helped kind of facilitate that. So I would go visit the teams, and Emig was racing there, and Kudrowski, and these kind of guys. And so it was kind of fun.
Jeff Emig, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And so we could get, and then I started traveling to all the nationals and supercrosses for them, and I'd go and make sure we're sponsoring these races, getting banners up, those kind of things. And so that's really what helped Wiseco a lot. And they really liked all the efforts that I did. They liked everything that I was able to do and bring to the table. So they liked that. And like I said, it was a really good
company.
Yeah, it was great, and it was a good fit for me, and then it rolled right into the company that I left there for. I still work with, and they kind of had a relationship, and that's Kurt Leverton owned Hot Rods and PivotWorks Hot Cams, and Wiseco was kind of the what do you call it, the importer or the main distributor for that, and that went away, and he took it back. And when that happened, I went with him, and he's out of Iowa, and then he started all these other companies with Cylinder Works, and then he ended up buying Vertex pistons, and then it became part of the All Balls Racing Group, and you have all these companies under there that they all own, and so I was able to do all that with them, and that's really opened up to the next level. And then kind of during that whole time, about 15 years ago, I started doing more stuff with Dunlop, and then so the Dunlop thing kind of works nicely with everything else that I do, and so with Dunlop, then it allowed me to. With all the magazines during the week, I go to the track a couple of times a week, or to their house, or they'll meet up with me. And we'll fit tires onto some of the newer bikes. Like right now, we're just doing all the shootouts and all the 2020 motocross bikes.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we make sure that we try to get all the Dunlops onto all those bikes, so that they're all look pretty for all the photos. And
don't
videos.
They come with Dunlops though?
Most of the bikes do.
Most of them.
But we put them all on the same tires. So there might be a shootout. There might be one or two bikes that come with brand X, let's say, or something. So so then we'll put them all on, and then when they're on Dunlops, some of them could be on two different tires. 3S or 33, for instance. And so this way we'll put them all on the same tire for the shootout, and they kind of like that. So when they're out there testing, all the bikes are on the same tire.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
obviously tires are one thing that if you're doing a shootout, it's the one thing that most people are going to be able to change the soonest on a bike and put to what they like.
Yeah, and it's important. It's where the rubber meets the road. And we can talk about tires too. I'd love to talk about that, but I forgot to kind of mention you were talking there about some of the companies that you work with most closely now. And correct me if I'm wrong, but some of those core companies are Pivot Works, Hot Rods, Hot Cams, Cylinder Works, Dunlop, Vertex Pistons, Cometic Gaskets, FMF, Works Connection, Unifilter, Wrench Rabbit, Fuel Star, All Balls Racing, Super Sprox. Did I miss anybody?
No, that's about it. It's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, no, it is really, really cool. I mean, and I know there's some other companies in there that you have relationships as well with, some of the plastic parts companies and different things that I've worked with you in the past. So it's so fascinating to me to hear you talk about how that came to be. So, it's kind of a perfect segue into this question. So you spend a lot of time making project bikes. You make how many, like 15, 20 project bikes and even some ATVs, right?
Right. So we do a few
per
ATVs.
year.
Yeah, a few
per year.
ATVs, UTVs a year. Try to do 2 or 3 of those a year. I wish I could do more. It's just logistically they're very difficult because they're twice or 3 times the size of a dirt bike, and it's just way more work. So it's a lot more work. And I have a couple buddies who I'll try to work with. Like if I have a couple, I call them, UTV buddies that I can help them do the build and facilitate it, and they can do a lot of the heavy lifting, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I can just help put it all together. Now, on those things, a lot of times you can make a lot bigger differences because stock, it's kind of like when you get a detuned dual sport bike or something. On those UTVs, you can make big gains by doing a lot of different things. Where on the dirt bikes, on, say, a modern 4-stroke motocross bike, you're not going to do a whole lot.
Because they're so
good.
They're so good right from the factory.
Yeah, you can go race them. So we do a few of those, and then I'll probably do about anywhere from 15 to 20 dirt bikes a year, and then I help on quite a few others with guys.
So tell us a little bit so maybe describe the typical work week for you, because I think there's a lot of people out there just thinking, man, that just sounds like a vacation, and it would be so easy and so fun. From my perspective, because people will say the same thing to me. They're like, "Oh, that must not be. It must be like you're not even working." And I know from my perspective, there's still work and there's some monotony that goes into this. So, kind of just take us through the average work week for you throughout the year. Like, what does Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday look like? How's your time spent when you're making these project bikes?
That's great. So, I think for me, I always joke around. It beats a real job, right? That's what I always say.
Right.
And so, but also the downside is there are times I wish I had an 8 to 5 job, and when I came home, my work didn't call me at 10 o'clock at night.
It comes with you.
It comes with you.
You never turn off, right?
No. So that is one thing, but I can't. I'm not going to diminish the fact that being able to work your own schedule is pretty amazing. We can. Like the fact I'm up here with you today on a Monday is kind of nice, but I have a tough week when I get back. I'm going straight, Tuesday morning, I'm going to be at KTM doing all you've seen the 50 Supercross Challenge races. They're racing at Monster Cup, and they have 16 or 17 of these bikes, and I change all the 50 tires, which is actually the worst tires to change.
They are hard.
They are hard.
So you've got to set up all those bikes for the Monster Energy Cup in Las Vegas.
Yes. So I go over to KTM, and they help me, and those guys, and they all hate it too.
Oh, is that because they all want to be on Dunlop tires, but the KTM, the 50s come with Maxxis tires?
Well, we just like to say something else. They come with something else.
Oh, something else.
So we put them on Dunlops,
Okay.
and so we have them. We have them all.
I can edit that out later.
So it's okay. So we have them all on Dunlop tires, and we're going to get that switched. And so that's going to take me most of Tuesday. We'll be over there.
How many bikes are there doing that?
I think they have like 15 or 16 that race, and then they do 2 or 3 extra bikes. So it's like
20. So it's 20 bikes.
Yeah,
front and rears.
Yeah,
and those are a nightmare. Those little bikes.
And so
the tires,
the rears, I kind of got a little system the last time, and Spencer helped me because the fronts are zero problem.
Spencer's your son, right?
Yeah, and so he helped me, and actually I come up with a new system, but they're really difficult. It's hard to explain, but when you're it's really tough. It kind of sucks. And I made a video showing how to do it correctly, but it's tough to get it right every time.
Which is so funny because you are the most experienced dirt bike tire changer I know, and to hear you say that it's frustrating makes me feel better because a couple times I've been out in the shop and my boys are there, and I'm trying to put tires on their bike, and I'm struggling.
Well, before they had when they have rim locks now. When they didn't have rim locks, it was a little easier. So, but you have to have a rim lock, and those things make good power now, and they hook up, so it's going to turn. So you need a rim lock.
That's funny. So tomorrow, that's what you're up to tomorrow is doing a bunch of 50s.
Wednesday, I'm going to go to Kuya. That's my favorite track to ride. That's kind of my guilty pleasure or whatever. And I'll try to meet up with some guys out there. But Wednesday, the plan is to go to Kuya. And that's where I'll try to get something tested. I always like to test something during the week, whether it's a different suspension. I picked up a new 350 that I have on loan from KTM, 350 SXF. And so I'm going to be riding that on Wednesday. And just love the bike so far. Only got to ride it once and just love it. And I think 350s we can talk about that a little bit more, but on the track, I really like 250s and 350s, and this new 350 is pretty cool.
That's cool. So then what does Thursday look like?
So Thursday, I'm doing tires for Motocross Action for their shootout. So I'll be going up, and that's just like 40 minutes away, and I'll be mounting tires on so there's 6 bikes for their.
So this is at the track then?
We're going to meet up at their shop.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the guys' shops and get it all ready, and they're going to shoot on Friday up at Glen Helen. So I'll be going out there on Friday as well, probably. To
kind of support or help out with things.
Yeah.
So when you're there at the track for one of these, magazines or other organizations supporting them, what is that like? You're at the track for 8 hours, what would you maybe have to do? You might have to do an oil change or help out with suspension or
no. Because most of the time a lot of the OEMs will come out. The OEMs have media guys and they'll come out. So we're usually pretty good friends with all the other media guys from the OEMs, and so they'll come out and support the event and have everything. And so usually, honestly, a lot of times we get a ride if they're riding the track.
Okay.
So that's good. A nice benefit. And then change tires as needed during the day. And then just kind of support the event, make sure all our stickers are on and everything looks good. And so that's kind of it's a lot of times that day is actually easier than the other days where you're actually doing more work.
Yeah. So you say you get to ride. Do you get to ride like some of the bikes that do these magazines when they're doing these shootouts? Do they ever come to you and just say, "Hey, what did you feel on this?" and giving extra input, or do they just kind of stick to their test riders?
Well, they usually stick to their test riders. A lot of times they'll ask me to do it, but I try not to because of my position I'm in. I try, and I like to be friends with all the OEMs.
Okay,
because it helps me. So I try not to come up with huge winners or losers in this because it's tough because I do see these guys weekly. And so I want to be careful about that. And I'm sure you've already felt some of that. And that's one of the things that's made you successful is that you're able to speak your mind a little bit more than maybe I can at times.
Well, that's true. It sounds like you'd be really good for politics. Are you going to run for mayor of Sun City?
Yeah, mayor of Sun City. I should be.
Oh no, that's good. No, but I do hear what you're saying. It's good to network and to create those relationships. It's probably something that I haven't done a lot of. Because my experience has been totally different from yours. I've just this guy out here in Utah that's doing his own thing.
Well, and your own thing's working. I think that that's what's neat about this industry right now with the shift. Things have changed, and I think a lot of people, even just a couple years ago, might not have totally respected like YouTube or what certain things bring to the table, but they sure do now. I mean, because they see their numbers like these other media outlets. They release videos and they can see their numbers of how many people watch it and are commenting and are engaged on it, and so. When they see your stuff and the other successful guys, because there's a good group of guys that are pretty successful, at least I say successful, but successful at least in viewership and that kind of thing, and have there's some really high quality content out there that I think a lot of people really enjoy.
Yeah, I remember. I won't name any names, but I was up at a climb event up in Idaho. I guess it was 3 years ago. And there were a couple of industry guys up there. I won't name their names, but I know you know who they are. And they, I got invited to come to this little media day ride thing. And here I was with guys who'd been writing articles in the magazines for many, many years. And they looked at me and I was just like this. I'm like, they didn't say it. They were nice, but it was what they weren't saying. They're like, this guy's a gimmick. Like, why is he here?
Yeah.
And I just smiled at that and I'm still here, and I'm still producing videos, and I'm still producing content, and in some ways I'm influencing, and it's because of this new, the new wave of the internet. There's a lot less happening in print. There's more happening online and happening on podcasts and things like that. And so industry has changed, and if you can't adapt, you're going to become a little bit more irrelevant, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. And I think it's funny that you had mentioned that, because there are guys that maybe have their head in the sand a little bit in the older school media that kind of would write somebody like you off, for instance. And so, and that's one of the reasons so what's funny is the reason I met you was, like, I don't know, however long ago it was, 3.5 years ago, whatever it was, when I was on YouTube, and I'm like, I didn't spend a ton of time on YouTube, but I was on it, and I go, man, this is kind of cool. And I started thinking about it, and I go, I should make something for myself. And I came up with this dirt bike TV idea. I'm like, I could do something. And what I was thinking is, honestly, because I have zero desire to shoot video. I have zero desire to edit video. So
it takes a special breed of person.
and I have a couple of buddies that do, and Spencer got a little bit familiar with it, and I don't say he enjoyed it, but he did it enough to appease me, and that kind of thing. And I paid him a little bit, and it gave me a way to obviously, like, keep him off the streets, so to speak, but it gave him some purpose to do. So I thought that was good. I got this teenage son, and he can edit video. That's better than him playing video games or something.
Yeah.
I'd rather him do that, and I could pay him a little bit to do it. And so we are searching and then I came up with this dirt bike TV idea, and then I looked around and I found out there was this dirt bike channel already. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So, and then I watched a few videos. I'm like, okay, this guy's got it figured out pretty good. So that's when I wrote you and said, I think I started opening some dialogue there, and then we met up shortly after. And so that's kind of how I came about, this. I'm like, I think there's a future here. Now, I don't get to spend as much time on, like, say, my videos. It's not my focus. My focus is working for those companies. And so I've been around other guys who are able to spend a lot more time and do higher quality content and more content. And maybe I think that's what reaches out to a lot of the guys that follow you. And one of the things I like about what your channel does is people are really engaged. Now, some of the comments are pretty silly, and I know you probably, there's a lot of them you have to blow off, but there's just a ton of support. So as soon as your video goes up, I mean, there's, I don't know how many, but thousands of comments just pretty quickly of people with their own opinions about this or that, and a lot of support. You get a lot of goofy comments, but
yeah, there's some that you just have to block. Like, after a while, you see, okay, this is a person who just is spreading hate.
Yeah.
And so you might block somebody like that. I'm okay with criticism, but if you're just going to be nasty and you're just doing it to sound mean, then you get blocked. And so over the years, I've had to block a lot of people because I just got tired of reading it. You know what I mean?
I don't have enough comments to worry. Mine are all positive because it's just small groups. But I see on yours, but it is nice how much positive stuff there is, though. I mean, I think sometimes we concentrate just on the negative ones, but there's so much. It's like 80-90% positive people just are like, they just love seeing, or you talk about this. And so that's what I think is cool about a lot of the way these videos are going. And I see it with some of the other guys too. And I work with, I go riding with Rado and Dirt and Iron, and he lives out by this track I ride a lot. So we get to ride a lot, and he's really passionate about dirt bikes and somewhat new to it, like you were. He
does a good job though.
He started as an adult like you did. He didn't ride until 5 or 6 years ago or something. So as a 30-plus-year-old, he got into it, and so it's kind of neat for me to see guys that get into it later. And what's cool, especially about trail riding, is if you get into it, say at 30, 35, whatever, if you stick with it, you can get pretty decent at it.
Oh yeah, and there's a ton of people that are doing that. I get that email almost daily now, where it's the 30-something or the 40-something, and even the 50 and 60-something guys that are like, I'm just getting into dirt bikes. And so that's a podcast episode for another day. In fact, I think I'm going to do a YouTube video on that as well, because it gets overlooked. We think so often, you think that dirt bikes, you have to start when you're a kid. And yes, if you are going to be Eli Tomac or whatever, you have to start, at 3 or 4.
No, that's a really good
There's
point.
a couple people that don't. I mean, maybe like there's some Christian Craigs or some guys out there that maybe started when they were in their teens. But if you were going to be competitive in racing at the highest level, you have to start as a kid.
Yeah.
But coming in and just enjoying the sport, like I've done, I didn't have my own dirt bike until I was 29 or 30, and now I'm 38. It's taken over my life, literally, and it's added a ton of benefit to me and my, my well-being, I guess I would say. And so it's a fun thing that people can come in at any age and have fulfillment from it.
Well, and the nice thing about coming in your 30s or 40s is you can afford to do it kind of right. Like I said, that is nice. And there's a group of guys that you're able to go ride with and that kind of stuff. That's going to be fun.
Right. You can do it a little bit more safely because you can afford all the safety gear. Because people will email me and say, hey, I have $2,000 and I want to get into dirt bikes. What dirt bike should I be getting? and my response back to them is I say, let's just pump the brakes for just a second here, because I would feel remiss if we didn't spend at least 500 of those dollars, or maybe 700 of those dollars on safety gear. Right. And so I'm going, you have $2,000 and you think you can go out and get a bike. And yes, you can. You can find a bike for $2,000. You're going to have to probably do a lot of maintenance and some fixing. But really, you only have about $1,200 for a bike because you need this other gear. And I'm not going to allow you to scrimp on the safety gear.
Right.
I want you to have really good boots. I want you to have a really good helmet. You've got to have gloves. You've got to have goggles. You've got to have, the correct riding pants. Jersey, I mean, yeah, you could wear your hoodie or whatever, but I want you to have some safety gear, and I want you to spend $200-$300 on your boots. Right. I want you to spend $200 or more on your helmet, because there are some things that it's just not worth it. Right. I mean, so it's funny that you say, as you get into this at an older age, it's good because you've got some of the financial means some of the time to do it right instead of cutting corners.
Exactly. And so I think it's great what's happening, and that kind of shift is nice.
So you spend a lot of time riding dirt bikes, more than I would say the average person, especially because a lot you're going to tracks a lot, you're doing a lot of trail riding. So can you kind of give us the split right now of your track time versus trail time? Because if I'm not mistaken, you used to spend a lot more time on tracks, and now you're spending a more significant portion of your time riding trail. So what's the split now percentage between track and trail?
It's hard to say, but living in California, part of the problem is it's hot and dry for most of the year. So let's say 7-8 months, right, where it's not that great. So when you're in California in June, July, August, September, a lot of those times a year, it's nice to go to a prepped motocross track that's all watered and nice, and like the Aquia track or Glen Helen, I can go to these tracks, get a ride in before noon, get all done, get everything washed and put away before hits 105. If you get out there early in the morning, get a ride in, it's kind of nice. So that's one of the reasons I still do a lot of moto, is just that it's convenient and easy. And trail riding in the summertime, or when it's hot and dry out in California, is not very fun.
It's more of a commitment to do the trail riding than just hit a moto track, right?
And it's just and a lot of the trails are in that time of year, it being so dry, and a lot of it's they call them red sticker, and so
green sticker, red sticker.
Yeah,
stuff.
So you're not allowed to be out in certain areas during the summer and so forth. So we do go up to a place called Kindy Meadows. That's like a 4-hour drive, and that's kind of up in that. But it would be similar, I'd say, to like AF, but not as good.
American Fork is what you're talking about here in Utah.
A place that and it's just pretty overridden for the last 40, 50 years, and the trails are pretty hammered. Real rocky in sections, and it's just not as flowy and fun as some other places. And some of that stuff, like I've seen you riding in Idaho recently. So we tend to do more ride trips with trail riding. Hey, we're going to go for 3 days, 4 days, and take a trip to Utah, Colorado. Those are our kind of favorite places. And then in California, the trail riding that we do that is really good is say from November, December. Once we start getting some rain, until April, May, there's some good trail riding up in the high desert that below Big Bear. So you get into some little bit of pines, open stuff, and there's some great trail riding in there. And some areas we have, and and even close to my house, within 10 minutes of my house, we can go some really cool places. We can go trail riding. That's really fun in the winter.
What are your favorite tracks down there where you live? What are the ones that you're frequenting the most?
So the main ones I like is Quia. It's on Indian land, and it's east of Temecula. And it's a wide open kind of sandy track they've added more jumps over the years. I kind of wish it didn't have as many jumps, but I do most all the jumps. And I've done quite a few videos there, Glen Helen's probably the next one. And then the rest of the tracks I do like, and I'll go to a little bit, but not too often, because the rest of the tracks are a lot of flatter tracks that have been all made into, I don't want to say supercross, because they're not supercross level, but they are, a lot closer to supercross than I want. Just too many jumps. And then it's not, I could probably do a lot of the track, but they get crowded with a lot of really fast guys. And it's not just pros, the fast kids now, like intermediate kids, are really fast, and they tend to be the ones that are the most, I don't say disrespectful, but they'll just run you dirty. They don't
just
care.
a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, they don't care. I mean, they'll jump, they'll cut right in front of you, cross jump right in front of you, whip it over your face, and you're just like, what the heck? Some kid who doesn't even know who you are or anything, and he's willing to take you out for nothing on a practice day. And that's what's taken over in California is practice days. So basically, all the tracks from Paula, Paris, Milestone, Glen Helen, all these tracks are open a bunch, and so guys can just practice a lot, and that's what's kind of killed off racing a bit in California and out west.
Just the practice days, they're hurting the racing. Like, what do you mean by that?
So it used to be, if you wanted to ride a dirt bike, you had to race.
Okay.
Back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you would pretty much, if you wanted to go to a track, it was open on, Saturday and Sunday for you to race. And nowadays, the tracks are open all during the week. And so guys can pay their $25 to $30 just to go practice. And so when they're doing that, then a lot of them, if they practice 2 or 3 days during the week, they can't afford to race. And so it's kind of killed off a lot of the racing. So there's not nearly as much racing going on in California as there was, 10, 20 years ago.
But is there more overall riding happening then?
I don't know if it's necessary. There might be more overall riding by the guys that are riding, but that group is probably getting smaller of overall people, at least from my feel for the industry.
Well, and I want to get into that a little bit later, talking about where you think the industry is going. But before we get into that, tell me what your favorite bike is right now for track riding, and then I'll ask for the trails too.
Well, on track riding, about the 250Fs, I like the Yamaha, the Honda, and the KTM Husky. All those bikes, I like the 250s. Now, I like them modified especially. Now, that's not a luxury that a lot of people can do, but working for Cylinder Works, and I can do a project to get one built, and if you can build a 250 and make it a close to 50 horsepower 250, make it a 270. Someone like Jamie at Twisted or Race Tech, I've had these guys build me some pretty rad bikes, and we'll get them tested. And then after that, I get to ride it for a while. Mm-hmm. And so those are my favorite bikes to ride, are 250, 4-strokes. A lot of guys beat me up because we don't ride 2-strokes anymore. And as far as 2-strokes on the track, I used to be. The funny thing was, I was a diehard 2-stroke guy when this 4-stroke movement was coming on in the early 2000s, like 02, 03, 04. In there, I was swearing I was going to buy the last CR250 and keep it in a crate, for 5 or 10 years. I was going to just stockpile a couple CR250s, and but I never did. And I caved in and started riding an 04 CRF 250. And once we started modifying those things, it made, on the track, it's way easier to ride than a 2-stroke. They're just smoother. You can be lazier. They're easier to ride. Now, there's a downside to that, is that, you don't have to be as good to ride one as you would a 250 2-stroke.
Okay.
And so you lose some of that skill set, but overall it's more fun. And I had Spencer ride a 125 and a 150 on the track for a long time. I kind of made him do it. We had a deal. He couldn't ride a big bike until he could pass me on the 150. And it took him till 15.
Oh, wow, because the 150 is still a full-size bike, though.
Yeah.
It's just the 152 stroke.
Yeah, but I wouldn't let him get onto a 4-stroke, a 250F.
Okay.
And he really wanted to get on 250F. Most kids do because they're faster and they're easy to ride. And he'd putt one around, but I wouldn't let him ride him at the track until he could pass me on the 2-stroke. And so
that's funny.
Once he could do that, then I let him start riding the 250F. And then once he did that, then he just left me. So
yeah,
it used to be, it would take, it took him a long time to get to where he could pass me. And then once he got on the 250F, then it would take, like a typical track, it would take him about 15 to 17 minutes to lap me. And so that we would try to go 2 or 3 lappings in our moto, try to do a 45-minute moto together. And so that's really fun, see how many times he could lap me.
Oh, that's cool. That's so cool. So then switching over to trail riding, off-road riding, trail riding, what's your go-to bike if you're going to do that?
Well, it's just without saying, it's a KTM 300 XC carbureted model.
Carbureted model. You're still not on you're not on the EFI bandwagon yet, right?
Not yet. I think that obviously this TPI is here. A lot of people think it's here because it's better, and
It's not.
It's not. So the reason it's here is because it's regulations in Europe that have forced KTM and Husky to switch to this model. I think the technology is good, and I think it's going to be fine. I think it's going to take a little bit to get better. There's some real downsides to the new TPI bikes that I don't like.
Like what?
Well, doesn't have a Kickstarter.
Yeah,
that part kind of stinks. And they're really quirky in how when you have the carbureted version with a good carburetor, either Electron or a Ki-on, not the stock Mikuni, unfortunately. That's a whole nother story. But if you have one of those other carbs on, it gives this real predictable power that you're used to riding. And I really like the type of power that it gives. And when you get on the TPI bike, it can be a little bit weird at times. Like I think the relationship with the power valve, how that works, it can be a little quirky. And I don't know how to better describe it, but it can feel real funny.
Do you still feel that way on the 2020s?
Yeah, I still do. And now I know it's getting a little better, but it still felt that way. And I also worry about, because I see a lot of behind the scenes things, and I just worry about the durability as well because of how they're mapped, or we'll call it jetting, right? How they have to be kind of jetted, and they're a little bit lean.
They're lean.
Yeah.
They're lean, especially off idle.
Right. And that's where, I went trail riding the other day, and I'd say 60% of our trail riding was off of idle. We were barely moving. You're in first, second gear the whole time. So that's where you're at most of the time on a lot of the trail rides we do are really slow trail rides.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. I feel like, though, the 2020s that I have, I've been off the bike for a month because of my finger here, but I've got about 20, 25 hours on both of my 2020s, and I think that they're better. I think as far as how they run, I think that they are running better, or as good or better of any bike that I've ever been on. And I'm not having the predictability problems that you're having. I think my 2020s are better than my 2019s. And I would also say I think the 250 runs better than the 300 on the TPI. There's just something about it. The ones that I've been around, and I own 3 of them right now, 3 or 4 of the TPI bikes. I think the 250 generally suits itself a little better to the TPI than the 300 does.
Yeah, it might be mapped a little better.
I just think the way that the power is, it just seems a little bit more natural, a little bit more smooth. So
I love those 2 strokes, and on the trail I just can't. I'll get on a 350 for a while, 350 XCF. That's the next bike that I love if you had to pick like another bike. And I do love that bike. What's funny is I think it's amazing. I'm loving it. And then if I hop on a 300, within 2 minutes, I'm like, this is way better. So if you get on a 300, and I like the XC type power and transmission better than the XCWs as a rule. The XCs, I do go up to a 51, which is what the 2020s come with.
Right.
I go up to a 51. That's what I've done. And since 17 when they came out. And you can carry second gear a lot of places. And that's what I like to be able to do, and still be able to slam down to first if you're really in trouble.
I totally agree with what you were saying as far as the XC versus the XCW, but why don't you just elaborate? Because I've taken from some crowds on YouTube, I've taken a ton of heat for saying that I like the XC platform better, and a lot of it is because of the gearing. Why do you think the gearing is better on the XC versus the XCW?
I don't like that gap, and there's nothing you can do about the gap in the gearing.
Bang.
Yeah, so there's nothing you can do. So you can...
No, this is what I wanted. There's nothing you can do about the gap between first and second.
You can't do anything about it. And so when I'm on the bike, if you're in first, it's just too low to do anything. And it would be fine if at a dead stop at the bottom of the hill, okay, it's useful there. But at normal riding, and then you shift up to second, and you're like, it felt like you just shifted to third. Like, I swear, I feel like that's what it always does to me, is I feel like, oh, crud, now I'm too high. And there's no way to fix it with changing the rear sprocket. It's because the gap is too big. So whatever you do with the rear sprocket, you're just going to make first even worse. If I put a bigger rear sprocket on, I'm going to make first even worse than it is now, and vice versa with going with a smaller rear sprocket. So that's been my biggest problem with XCWs. And unfortunately, there's a lot of, because we end up buying an XCW headlight to put on it or whatever.
Yeah.
We tend to make them look more like an XCW. So that's not the It's not about the looks or anything. It's just that I think that part's a little better.
The gearing, yeah.
And I do think I'm not a huge thing. A lot of people beat up the PDS, the shock, and I have that on my EXCs. I have 2 EXCs right now that are really awesome. For off-road riding, I don't know that the PDS is a big deal, but it does seem like, for whatever reason, our XCs do feel like they handle a little bit better in some ways.
I think that's just the geometry. I think people try to say it's because of the linkage or not, but I think it's the geometry of the front end. I think that the XC has a more stable feel. When I go from an XC, if I'm riding my XCW and I'll put 5 hours on it, and then I switch over to the XC feels like a longer bike. It feels more stable.
Yes.
And so if you're in really, really tight woods, you like a nimble bike. But a lot of the stuff we're riding out here in the West isn't real tight. And so it just lends itself more to that bike that's more stable, feels a little bit longer. So in addition to the gearing, I agree with you.
This is a podcast, so no one can see you move your hands.
I know, but it still helps me to talk. I'm doing the length. Jay's sitting over here with his hands, folded like he's going to Sunday school. So no, I'm just kidding. So that's an interesting question, because you said your second favorite bike would be a 350 XCF for the trails. So here's my question for you: Rekluse auto clutch or no?
No. And you mentioned it the other day in a video about you had a rear brake. I think you were talking about, and how I don't like things. One of the reasons I've been against it is because I have a ton of different bikes that I ride. And so even if I got used to it and then I started to like it, then the problem would be I'd have to put it on all my bikes if I liked it. So, and then the times I have ridden it, for the most part, I call it cheating a little bit. And if you're riding a 300 XC or TPI, any type of 250 or 2-stroke on the trail, I don't know why you would need one myself. Now, if you're on a 500 and you're stalling it, and you're on a big 4-stroke and you're stalling a lot and you really need it, it feels to me like you're cheating. And I don't like, there were some characteristics I didn't like, is like when you're stuck on a hill. I like, being able to kill the bike, and I know I'm in gear, it's not going to roll backwards,
Yeah.
And I don't want to have an extra brake and all that. And people go, you can add an extra brake and this and that. So for me, and I don't want to beat up any company. Obviously,
it's a good company.
They're great guys. I've dealt with them on some projects and stuff, and they're really good guys. They have a good following, and I don't fault people that do it and they only have one bike, but I do ride a lot of different bikes. And for me, I like the feel of just the regular clutch. I do like that feel, and I guess the challenge of it. But as I say, I like that, and it's cheating. I still I'll either run a Trials tire or a Dunlop AT 81 EX, which is like really cheating.
Yeah, no, it sounds like we're in sync on that. Not to beat a dead horse, but I get so many questions. I even had this question on my Facebook page the other day, where they're saying, Kyle, what do you think of the Rekluse? And I say, hey, let me start out by saying it's a fantastic company and it's a really good product. Mm-hmm. But in some ways, the Rekluse is trying to solve a problem that I don't want to solve. And then it makes it harder for me to do some of the things like pivot turns and log crossings and rock hopping and stuff, because the clutch is trying to decide whether or not to engage at the same time. I'm trying to do a precise input into the clutch, throttle, all that stuff, because the clutch is engaging based off your RPMs.
And you bring up a good point. I think that some guys that get it, it's like they're cheating themselves a little bit, because they're never going to be able to get better at maybe some things that they could get better at if they kept their regular clutch on. That's what I feel like. If you have your regular clutch, you're going to get better. I was riding with a group of guys, and one of the guys, he had one on his, and I hopped on his bike, and I was like, man, you don't really need this. He was on a TX 300, and I just think it's going to hold him back from ever getting any further, progressing wise on his skill set, because he's always going to be able to just put up stuff, so to speak, but he's never going to like clean something gnarly and wheelie up this like section that he would if he was practice it a bunch on with a regular clutch.
Yeah, he might be that guy that gets down stuck in a wash and he's trying to pull out of it in third gear. I've been with these. I've been with guys that it can tend to happen. Now, not everyone does that, and there will be a million people that would want to counter and say, I ride my Rekluse installed bike just like you ride yours, and I use my clutch just like you do yours, and all these other things. But I don't know, it's just an interesting topic. To me, the Rekluse or not is almost turning into 4-stroke versus 2-stroke. There's a lot of heated opinions on both sides of it, so I just like to ask. So, Jay, tell me, your opinion on this is going to be a lot more weighted and more valuable than what my opinion is. So I want to get your take on this. Is the arrow in the dirt bike industry as a whole, is the arrow pointing up or down for our industry as a whole?
As a whole, I would have to say down, unfortunately, because while we have more visibility, like with YouTube, like with your channel and all these other channels, and I think there's a lot of positive things we see with Supercross big and outdoor nationals are big, and a lot of the off-road racing's big. We see a lot of it because the media is so big, right? Social media is big. Everything, we see a lot of it in our face. But the reality is they're selling way less bikes than they sold 10 years ago, back before the boom when everybody was buying lots of bikes. So the overall market is definitely smaller, and I think it is shrinking. It's an old man's market. If your dad or uncle isn't getting you into racing or riding, for the most part, there's not a lot of young. What do you call the people younger than millennials? That group,
Gen Z or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know if we're going to get a whole lot of them coming into this deal because they're stuck on Fortnite or whatever, and they're not going to come get into dirt bikes. It's just not as appealing to them. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think riding land is a big one. There's not as much. When riding was big in the 70s and 80s, a lot of kids rode from their house. They could get away with sneaking out from their house and going down to the riverbed or to whatever, over by the dump. I always say there's always usually a place you can ride if there's a dump in your town, or train tracks. Those are the places to look for if you go, oh, there's nowhere to ride in my town. I go look by the dump or the train tracks, and you can usually find a place to ride. So you could do that back then, and that's all gone away in a lot of areas. And that brings up a whole nother segment. I think that's why a lot of guys are getting into dual sporting later, because they can leave from their house without the added deal, and they can go
because they're plated.
And they go putz around, find a little bit of dirt, go play in some dirt that they, whether it's legal or kind of legal, they can go find some dirt somewhere, play, and then ride back to the house kind of thing. Or, of course, do trips with guys and do something similar. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons that I think dual sporting is going to catch on. But as far as the overall industry, unfortunately, I think it is headed down. Now, it's not all bleak. There's still a lot of people who want to ride, and I think it's going to, be around a long time. It's not like it's going away. I always say if you've ridden dirt bikes, you're for the most part, most people are hooked.
Yeah.
I always joke around that it's all these other activities. And when I see people doing some activities like golfing or other things, I go, these are activities that people created, that never rode dirt bikes. And so there has to be activities for people that don't or can't ride dirt bikes.
Yeah. So those are all the golfers and all the other. It's funny you mentioned that because I've golfed in my life. I've done a lot of different hobbies, but nothing has spoken to me. Even airplanes and long range shooting and guitar and things. Nothing has taken over my life like dirt bikes have. And maybe it's just in our blood, But I think you're right. Once you get into this thing, if you get that taste, you can never kind of get out of your mouth.
It's pretty addicting, and there's a reason for it, is because it's pretty dang awesome. I think that's the reason. And so if you have to explain it to somebody, they don't get it. And one of the neat guys, Kurt, one of these guys I worked for years, he had this theory, and what was always kept him successful. One of the cool things about this industry is like FMF, and a lot of these successful companies are run by entrepreneurs who just started. They have no college experience, a lot of them. FMF, for instance, Donnie was a racer and just started making pipes and to help people. But they totally understand guys that want parts, what they want, and they totally get that. And Kurt would have this thought or theory about, if you don't understand what it's like on Friday night or Saturday night to be missing your part, or the wrong part showed up for your bike and you can't ride that weekend, and you're willing to kill to get that part, you don't get it. They don't understand. And when you do that, and so a lot of the big companies, and within our aftermarket, a lot of the companies have been bought by big companies, and so that's one. And a lot of those big companies, unfortunately, don't get that part, and that's what happened to White Brothers going out of business, and some of these companies that get people in place who don't understand that this is a lot different. When you're selling dirt bike parts, it's a lot different than just selling gadgets and widgets for a lawnmower or whatever type of other.
It's a passion. There's a passion behind it, right?
Right. Where some of these NBA type guys might not understand that, hey, if a guy gets the wrong part on Friday night, he's going to be really pissed and never want to buy anything from you. They don't understand that because they don't think it's a big deal that he gets it on Monday. They don't understand.
Yeah, because they don't understand the timing thing. You've got a finite amount of time, or the race is on Saturday/Sunday, whatever, and it doesn't matter if it comes Monday because that blew your whole weekend.
Right, you're just done.
Yeah,
and so that's one thing that's happened in this industry a little bit. So that is one downside that I see happening. But there's some positives. Some of these companies are realizing, hey, we need enthusiasts at the core of these companies, and so a lot of them are realizing they need enthusiasts who totally get. And that's one of the things that happens like at Dunlop, and they have guys who ride. I mean, Brock Glover's one of the big guys there, and he's got a 6-time champion, and Brian Fleck, he's a guy that still rides today in a bunch of dirt track and moto. And so we have all these kind of guys. When you have enthusiasts at big key decisions and at these companies, it's kind of cool because they see it how an end user would see it, and how every guy would see it.
I love it. Transitioning to something that else I see in the industry, I want to get your take on this. Electric dirt bikes. Is this a thing, or is it a fad that's just going to go away?
I sure hope it's not a thing, and I sure hope it's a fad that goes away. Now, people will go, "You're wrong or crazy," but I think part of the reason that dirt bikes are cool is the smell of gas,
the smell of 2-stroke and the 4-stroke,
and the thunder of a 4-stroke.
Gas.
Race gas smell. I mean, there's so much stuff, and doing the type of riding we're doing, and like you're in a remote area of Idaho just a few weeks back, right? There's absolutely no way ever you're going to take an electric bike out there. We're complaining about not having a Kickstarter backup on a bike that we could bump start if we had to down a big hill. Okay, now we're talking about taking an electric bike. If it had a failure or you run out of battery and you're lost, you're lost in these trails for a few hours trying to find your way back. So in the trail segment, I could just not see this. I mean, now maybe some, hour, 2-hour loop or whatever around your house, but not a real adventure. You're going to be able to take a electric bike. It just seems very impractical to me.
Unless, what if they got the battery technology to where it could do 4 engine hours?
Yeah, and I guess that's possible
because a lot of our trail rides will be maybe 6-hour, 7-hour trail ride, but it's really 4 engine hours on some of these longer rides. So if the battery was 4 hours, then would it work?
It's I guess it's possible, but I would be so sketched out the whole time. Like, I was talking about that ride I'm going to do in a few weeks, and it's going to be a 3 to 5 hour ride. And we've had things go wrong on those rides where they end up being, 6 or 7 hour rides, your best laid plans or whatever. So that's something that's going to be that we're going to look to. I felt like even when Alta was doing supposedly well, I told Spencer, I'd be like, man, this is all smoke and mirrors, because I think it was a bunch of investors, and even when they were selling these things for $15,000 and then they got them down to like 12, I go, man, it just seems like it's not real. It's not real because I think the reality is they don't have that cost down yet enough to be able to even compete. First of all, I don't think they can even sell a bike for real for what a KTM 450 costs. They can't sell a bike for $10,000. I don't think they can really get there with the apples to apples deal yet. And if they do, it's going to be subsidized by somebody. So it's not real yet, in my opinion. It's not like a real viable deal. And I think that's the reason that those companies went out and they were based in up there in Silicon Valley, and I think that's part of the problem. And so when KTM comes to market, like right now they have a new 50. They unveiled this weekend at Straight Rhythm, and with that coming out,
the electric 50.
Now there's some potential for that. Now it's going to kind of suck, I think, to have a generator. You have to have KTM guys are joking they need to make a generator now, so they're going to have to make a gas generator, and with all those ramifications, right? Long term for the environment, making generators to charge their electric bike. And so is the whole concept, even in the automotive industry, which electric cars more practical in automotive. I don't want to sit at a Starbucks while my Tesla's charging and talk to those types of guys, like reading their Tree Hugger magazine.
Yeah, I think the batteries have to be hot swappable, where a battery is affordable and it's got to be swappable so that you can come into a pit or to the truck or whatever and swap your battery in 2 minutes or less,
yes,
and then go back out and then have a charging station which is charging up your other battery, and it can't take 6-8 hours to charge. If it does, it won't work. It won't work for camping. I mean, I think about it. When I go camping, I will take 4 to 6 bikes with me because I've got, 4 kids, and sometimes I'll take an extra bike for me just in case something happens or I'm testing. But the whole point is I can't do electric. I can't do electric when I'm camping.
That's true.
So they've got to be hot swappable, the batteries. Technology has to move a long ways. It works for a track. It could work for a track bike because if you were, you're right by the truck. But if you had a swappable battery, the other thing is clutch. The ones that I'm seeing don't have clutches because they're saying, well, we don't need a clutch because the bike makes 100% torque at 1 RPM. And I'm going, the clutch is not about how much power it can make. It's about modulating the power to the rear wheel.
Right.
And my clutch is one of my main inputs. I have front brake, rear brake, throttle, and clutch. Those are my inputs here. And if you take one of those inputs away, you have just hampered me. Now how am I going to do a double blip, which I'm still working on? How am I going to do a double blip? How am I going to get over a rock? How am I going to do all these things? You've taken away one of the ways that I modulate power. And I think if you're going to make an electric dirt bike, it has to incorporate a standard clutch.
Yep.
What do you think?
Oh, I agree. I mean, it needs, because the ones I've rode, obviously, surprisingly, the first thing is they do have way more power than you think as soon as you hop on one. Even the mountain bikes, for instance. But the Altas and the actual moto bikes that I rode, they were kind of scary when you took off. It was like, yeah, they got plenty of power and torque there, but you want something to modulate that. And that's what I think, however they come up with something is going to need to do that. But again, I kind of hope it goes away. And I don't know that there's enough true funding there on this 50cc thing. KTM's still going to keep their two-stroke going. So until there's a demand that says, hey, we can't make, gasoline engines, like that's legitimate. I don't see it ever taking over myself.
Well, and the frustrating thing to me is if we get to the point where we can't have a gas motorcycle, it will be because we've gotten so, and I'm going to use air quotes, we've gotten so green that we don't think that these small engines are too bad for the environment. My problem with this is for every dirt bike, there's 100 lawnmowers or maybe 500 lawnmowers for every dirt bike. And there's all of these small engines. Dirt bikes are such a small drop in the bucket for the total carbon that we are burning on this planet. And it frustrates me that dirt bikes, they seem like they're just this easy target because they're loud, and even on the two-strokes you can see the smoke coming out of them. But it's like there's a million cars here, and I know cars have gotten better on the emissions, but there are literally there's 100,000 cars for every freaking dirt bike out there.
No, I don't know where the pressure is coming. I think there's just maybe people wanting to plan ahead, but I don't think that there's. I mean, if we look at the entire, they call it the footprint, right? Of
carbon footprint or whatever.
What it takes to build batteries, the plant that it takes to build batteries, and then when you're going to have the old batteries when they spike 5 or 6 years old or whatever, and if you look at the entire impact in the environment,
the batteries are worse,
right? And everything I've read about cars and all those batteries and those, you get a 10-year-old Tesla or whatever these cars are that are electric, how they're going to have to dispose of these batteries in these cars that are hybrid or full electric. It's more of an impact in the environment. So it's just all different type of impact.
Right. And even on cars, not to go on a tangent, but electric car, that's a coal powered car in the United States. We sit there and think electric is clean. Guess what? Most of your power in the United States of America, electricity is generated by burning coal, which is another fossil fuel. So all we do is we go from burning one fossil fuel to burning the other fossil fuel. So is it really better? And I say no.
And I hope that's the case. So I hope it stays that way.
So here's another question for you. So in the last several years, it seems like KTM Husqvarna has kind of taken over in the off-road segment. Maybe not as much in the motocross segment because the Japanese bikes are still making really, really good competitive motocross and supercross bikes. But in the off-road segment, KTM has kind of taken over. When I first started riding bikes, my first KTM was in 2012, and I hardly saw any other orange bikes out there. Now, fast forward 2016, 2017, 2019, I almost only see orange bikes when I'm out on the trail. So my question to you is, can the Japanese bike makers keep up with KTM and Husky in the off-road segment? And if they can, what would they have to do to actually keep up?
Well, my immediate answer is no. Unfortunately, I think that the biggest advantage or whatever you'd call it for KTM is that they don't seem to. They have like we joke around that they've got the bean counters, the accountants. They've locked them up into a different room. Where the Japanese manufacturers have to meet a much higher standard, much higher sales level, I think, of bikes, and so
or even profit margin, or I think, ROI, return on investment.
I think all that goes into factor where KTM has said, "Hey, we're okay having X number of models," and they have way more models. That's another problem, for the Japanese manufacturers to compete with, is that they have. The fact that we've been talking about XC and XCWs, just recently has, Honda and Yamaha come out with FX and WRs on their 4-stroke line. Right?
They've had the WRs for a long time, but it was kind of just forgotten.
Yes.
Right.
And so now that they're trying to pay more attention to that and come out with them, they also, one of the other problems stock-wise is they tend to be way more conservative on power. They seem to be detuned a lot more than
the Japanese bikes.
Yes, so that's a big problem, is that they come detuned stock, where the KTM and Huskies models are ready to race. I mean, they typically are. They really are. And like you mentioned, seeing all the bikes, I get resumes and I see different things from guys racing all over the country. If you look at a start line at any off-road race, it's like 80-90% orange
KTM,
and white bikes, out there. It's crazy what they've done. And I think the biggest thing for the Japanese is that they are way slower to be able to make changes. And so we've seen Honda just come out with a new 450L and X. And it was kind of a big news. They made a big to-do about it. And it's a really good bike, but it's also very detuned. And it's heavy, came with a huge exhaust, and it's overbuilt compared to what the EXCs on the KTM side are. So it's nice that KTM's able to still, and they've had to detune their EXCs the last few years, because if you get like a 13 to 16 EXC, 15 EXC, they're actually faster than the newer bikes and a little better in some ways. So they've had to detune, but they're still, stock wise.
Is that the emission stuff? Detuning for green sticker in California?
Right. So they, and for their street legal bikes and the EXCs, so that they have a restrictor inside the air boot now. In between the throttle body and the air filter, there's actually a little reed cage in there just to stuff things down in there. And then the mapping. But, we get beyond that. Since we're only riding a closed course and not on public lands, we just run a Vortex ECU and do everything we want to do to make them run. They run as good as a motocross bike. It's pretty easy. And the Hondas now are like this 450L and 450X. There's guys like Jamie at Twisted who have actually come up with mapping and being able to map those things to where they run really good. And that's what people are going to start running in Baja. Because for Baja, for the last, since 2005, they've been running Sierra 450Xs. That's been the bike of choice for most guys in Baja. Just because it's really durable. And so everybody kind of runs it that goes there. And it's been the mainstay for Baja.
And now they've finally updated that. But I mean, it seems, I agree with what you're saying. The update cycles on the KTMs happen every year, and sometimes even twice a year. Whereas the update cycles on the Japanese bikes, it's like every 3 to 4 years.
Well, and they're getting the only reason they're getting a little quicker is because KTM and Husky has really raised the level. And you mentioned the motocross thing for the like if you look at 16, 17, 18 in there. KTM had really distanced itself from the Japanese, even on the motocross side. But just recently, Yamaha, Honda, and even Kawasaki with their new KX450 have all made a stronger effort, and they're trying to do things quicker. But for them, quicker is still slower than KTM, but they're getting there quicker. And I think KTM has pushed these other manufacturers to do things a little quicker. And the fact that the Kawasaki KX450 comes with a hydraulic clutch now, they never would have done that if KTM wasn't doing so well.
Yeah.
And, little things like that. Like, to me, after you ride with a hydraulic clutch and you get on a bike without one, you're like, why does not everyone do this?
Right. No, I totally agree. I noticed you left out one of those the typical big four manufacturers out. You haven't even mentioned the one that starts with an S. What's going on there? What's your feeling with the one that
They're,
starts
they're
with
a
an
great
S?
they're a great company, and I rode
Suzuki.
Yeah, I rode Suzuki's a lot over the years because I really like the bikes. It's just unfortunately the last few years they just have been left behind a little bit, and I don't know the total reasons, if it's what it is in the guys, in their development side, but they're the only bikes left with a Kickstarter, and they're also a bit heavy. The bikes are heavy and just behind everything else. And in the 450 side, they're the only one with a Kickstarter still, and no electric.
Does it have electric? It doesn't have electric start.
No.
So I'm all for Kickstarters, but
Just as
I'm all for
backups.
electric start. Yeah.
And on motocross bikes, on a motocross bike, I'm not opposed to a bike not having a Kickstarter.
Sure.
On a trail bike like an XC, now that's a different story. It should have a Kickstarter backup. That's a total different deal, because on a motocross bike, you're at the track. No big deal to swap a battery or to jump it, bump it, whatever you got to do.
Push it.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
But you're stuck in a trail situation. It should come with that. So the Suzuki thing's a bit odd, and that both their bikes have just recently been updated. And so I don't know that we're going to see even new updates for them for a couple more years, unfortunately. So the bikes they have are very good. They're just a few years behind maybe everything else right now.
Yeah, I was listening to Chris Kiefer's podcast, and he was, I don't know, a couple months ago, he was talking about the Suzuki, and he's like, look, it's still a good bike.
Yeah.
And you can look at it as this is a bargain bike because it's a couple $1,000s cheaper. But I worry because I feel like if one of these guys, if one of these big manufacturers is going to give up, I feel like right now it might be Suzuki. And I look at Yamaha, Honda, Kawasaki. These are huge corporations, billions of dollars big, but the dirt bike segment is this little sliver offshoot, and I've got to say they're not getting the budgets that they want to make the product that they want to make. They're just getting, like the little here's little pennies, like the big corporation drops down a few pennies down to the dirt bike department and says, hey, go turn a profit on this, but they're not really investing in it. Whereas kind of what I interpreted what you were saying is KTM is doing it the other way. It's only a dirt bike company, and they're throwing more caution to the wind, and they're being a lot more liberal with their R&D dollars, and it ends up in a better product.
And they're really committed, and now they're committed to street bikes as well. They're going after other areas, and that's what's really cool is that they have thrown that out the window. And these Japanese manufacturers, there's a lot of pride that goes into, from what I can tell, that motivates all their racing efforts and their efforts. And I don't think your Suzuki's going to go away from dirt bikes anytime soon, even though they're going to be behind a little bit. I think they're going to come back, and I think we'll see something good in the next few years from them. So I don't think that's the equation. They have a lot. What's funny is that I think, because it doesn't make sense, any of this racing stuff, to pay Villopoto or Tomac the kind of money they do. And I've heard rumors with bonuses and winning these championships over $10 million, to $12 million a year for some of these top guys that are winning Supercross championships, right? So if that's the case, and then plus all the other money they make, but I'm talking about just the money from the manufacturer, right? And then what it costs to put a semi-truck and a whole team on the road for the year.
Millions,
right? So there's absolutely no way they sell enough KX 450s or 250s combined to justify what they're doing. So it has to be a company-wide, promotion, whatever they want to call it, that they take pride in winning Supercross races and having guys out there. So, it makes sense, and they sell enough heavy equipment, whatever it is, that offsets what they lose in dirt bikes, because it obviously doesn't make sense.
So you think it's a losing? You think a lot of these race teams? I mean, to restate that, and this is just us speculating, but you being plugged into the industry, you're saying you think that might be those race teams are not in the black. I mean, they're operating in the red, and they're being subsidized by the big company backing them.
Without a doubt. Yeah, they don't sell enough KX models
to pay for the race team.
No way. There's no way it would justify, because you'd have to sell. They would need to be selling, $20,000, $30,000, 20 or 30,000 dirt bikes a year, and they don't. That number's like a quarter of that.
Because in my mind, I've always thought, well, they're doing this. They're trying to pump the money into the racing, because then they'll make it all back in the dirt bike sales. But what you're saying is you don't think there's enough dirt bike sales to even pay for that.
Not even close. Yeah.
Wow.
No, there's no way. And so it has to. It with that Japanese culture, they really enjoy, and even even KTM enjoys winning, right? But it's a brand thing, and so for them, they think it helps with the rest of their brand, whether it's Honda selling mowers and generators and Civics or whatever, that they think it trickles down and with these
And maybe it does.
Yeah.
It probably does.
and so it
if
helps.
you've got a big enough company. So then how does KTM fund it?
And that's what we've for the last 5 years been wondering how in the world this happens, but they've made an effort that they still are in the plus somehow after doing this, And I think
they don't have generators or cars or track hose or anything else to fall back on.
No, they can't.
Yamaha sells pianos and personal watercraft and everything else and guitars. So they've got this other thing that can do it. So how does KTM subsidize it?
It's crazy, and not only that, but they seem to be doing the most advancements. Now they might not always have the best winning bike or whatever, but they're doing the most advancements and like have the best, a lot of the best parts on the bikes.
And to me, more important than the bike is the rider riding it. I mean, we just saw Red Bull Straight Rhythms this last weekend where Ken Roczen wins on a 2006 Honda CR250, and I'm going, and he was up against some of the guys that were on these brand new 2020 KTMs, and I'm going, but I've never heard of you. I know who Ken Roczen is, right. And so you can put Ken Roczen on my kid's bike, and he might still beat you, But it's so interesting to me to see some of these things in the industry. It's fun. So what's just kind of, as kind of we wrap up here a little bit, what do you think the trick is to staying relevant in the industry in your situation? And I'll add some color to that question. I kind of feel like guys like you and me, in fact, I'm more of an extreme. You're not as much on the periphery, but I'll just say there's the core, manufacturers that are at the core, and then there's the race teams around them, and then there's these, companies that are on the periphery that are making all these aftermarket parts. And then maybe another ring out, there's guys like me or you, and I'm not saying I'm on the same level as you, I'm not, but we're kind of on the periphery of the dirt bike world, right? Yeah. So what's the trick that you've seen to staying relevant in the industry when we're out here on the periphery? How have you done it?
Well, for me, all the companies I work for, I tried to make sure that they feel like they're getting a good value for what I do, and so making sure that I do everything I can to have their products show up in any way I can, whether it's banners on a truck or on a project build, or getting it into any magazine or video, any way I can, and making sure that it comes off in a good light. And it's nice that I've worked for good companies that I don't have to peddle something that I don't believe in, which is kind of nice. And so I've had opportunities. People have hit me up for certain things, and I've been able to, decline some of those and go, hey, I'm just going to stick with these companies that I work with. And I work with some great companies and some really good people. So that part's kind of cool. And that's, I think, as far as, as with anything you do, I think you want to stay where they appreciate you. I mean, that's as with anything in life. If they see a value in what you're doing, you're going to continue doing it. And that's what I've been able to try to do. And so we work a lot of, some days I'll work, 14 hours and the next day I could go riding and just work a few office days and it's not too bad, but you take the good with the bad. And I do a lot more office work than maybe I'd like, but that's what you have to do to communicate nowadays. I got to keep everybody updated on reports and emails, and good communication I think is key. One of the questions I get a lot from guys is, they wish they could do, find an industry job like what I have. And for the most part, I'm the only one that does what I do. And that's just something I've been able to build into. And even when I got on with Wiseco, 27 years ago or so it was, that position didn't exist. I helped create a position. I convinced them they needed somebody to do something.
Interesting.
And for the most part, most of the jobs that I still have right now and so forth are jobs that didn't exist. I pitched them on something that they didn't have. And so
I love that.
Well, what's nice about that is there's no competition there's no interview process with a bunch of other guys. You sell yourself and can pitch on something. So I joke around a lot. I tell guys, hey, just work hard, go to school, whatever, and get a job outside the industry where you can afford dirt bikes. Because one of the big problems I see within the industry is, as a whole, the industry doesn't pay extremely well within the industry. And there's guys that have some good jobs and
all the money is right at the top. So
right.
Those top riders, the Tomacs and the Rocks.
And then maybe some of the team managers, and then some of the key salespeople at some of these companies, maybe some of the higher ups in their marketing and so forth. But the guys actually on the ground, unfortunately, a lot of them don't make a good living. So, and some of the mechanics and different things. So what I see a lot of those guys do, first of all, they get in here and they're working 60, 70 hours a week, traveling some 80 hours, and then they stop riding dirt bikes. And I go, you don't ride anymore? They're like, yeah, I'm sick of dirt bikes. Like they're sick of dirt bikes. And I'm like, how could this happen? Like the whole reason you got working in this industry was because you love dirt bikes. And now you're working so much and you despise it that you don't like dirt bikes. And so it's really hard for me to fathom. And you can't to me, like if you're going to work in the industry, you shouldn't let that happen. If it gets to that point, then why work in here? Go work at something you could actually make more money at. And
yeah,
so it happens a lot. And so I see guys, they'll plug away for 5 or 10 years, in their, 20s and early 30s. And then they end up leaving the industry because they can find something better. So it's hard to make a little niche for yourself. And if you can, and then you're really blessed like I've been, and that's been pretty nice. So that's what I tell guys is, if you can find a good niche and you can make a living at it, that's great. But if not, it's not the end of the world. I know some really, most of the people I ride with don't work in the industry. They have real jobs, I say. And so I have a hard time finding guys to ride on Wednesdays. I have a little better time on Saturdays when I'm only competing with soccer. But on Wednesdays, I tend to ride with other guys without real jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I feel similar. People will say, well, I want to make money on YouTube or something. And first I say, I don't make money on YouTube. I would have been better off delivering pizzas. And so when people are really push it though, and they say, no, how do I start a business kind of like what you've done? And the answer is you need a good job first.
Right.
Because you're not going to make money at this in the beginning.
When I loved your post the other day talking about how you had a great job, that helped you for a few years get this going and give you this opportunity to do it full time.
Yeah, you've got to have that backing because, in some cases, as you're going to build, I love what you said, you build your own position. If you're really going to do this, you might need to build your own position. And the only way that works is if you've got a good paying job and this, venture that you want to start in dirt bikes or ATVs or whatever it is, that's going to be your side project, your passion project, your, what's the word I want to use? Your side hustle.
Yeah, right.
And so you're going to have a good job. Because if your side hustle has to make money in the beginning, I think it's probably doomed to failure.
Right. And I warn people because a lot of them do start their own business, whether it's making graphics or whatever they're going to do, right? And to get into the industry because they love this industry so much. And a lot of them make the mistake of, thinking they can make it. Where most small businesses, we could look at the statistics, but it's very small that survive and anything. And then once they make a partnership, most of them have to partner with somebody, right? And those partnerships are somewhat doomed for failure as well. I looked up the stats and it's like it brought it down like another 30 or 40%.
If you have to have a partner.
Right.
Because the people's, objectives don't align. And
right. Most
ideologies or whatever.
Well, I joke around. Most marriages, over half marriages fail, right? And so what makes you, and those two people loved each other at one time.
Yeah.
Okay. When you have a business partnership, you didn't love each other. You just got in a business because you guys both wanted to make money. You might be friends, but you both wanted to make money. So then, in a business partnership, there's always somebody that thinks the other person's, making too much or doing not enough work or whatever it is. It's going to always be there. So it's nice when it's just you to blame. That's been like with my deal. I just work for myself and with these companies I work for, and it's just me. I don't have to, be just myself. My wife helps a ton, and we're able to just, it's just all on me if things don't go well.
Yeah, and there's some advantages to that. There's some disadvantages. It creates additional stresses. I've just been kind of reflecting because I'm just kind of hit my year mark in doing Dirt Bike Channel full time, and it makes me kind of wonder where the year went. It was a little bit depressing when I kind of realized that. I'm like, wait, what do I have to show for it? But at the same time, I'm going, well, I haven't lost my house yet. So but you have some freedoms like you said, but there's also some additional stresses and fears that come along when there's no one else to blame. There's no management department to shoulder blame. There's no HR department. If there's a failure, it's yours and you have to own it.
Exactly.
So well, it's been super enlightening having you on. How do people, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you? I mean, I mentioned it kind of at the beginning of the show, but if they want to follow what you're doing, how's the best way for them to?
Oh, sure. So, my my website's not much. I don't sell anything on my website. It's just more for showing all the project bikes I build, which is jclarkent.com. And then YouTube, we try to get one video a week or so up. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 weeks. But
Are you still going to do that with Spencer out of town?
we have a little stockpile.
Okay, good.
So my son's gone for 2 years on a mission for our church. So that's going to slow down. But I do have a couple other buddies helping, and I'm going to do a few other things. But it's not my priority, so it's not a huge deal. But I do enjoy doing it, and it's interesting. So my Instagram is dirt.bike.tv. And then I guess that'd be about it. And I was thinking, since we're recorded here and we could commit you, I think you need to come out to California and learn how to ride dirt bikes on a motocross track.
I need to. And the thing that you said in that text message, you said, hey, it'll be safe tracks and it'll be well groomed and all those things. So I think that would probably be a good place for me to start, is out there.
Yeah, and because a lot of tracks outside of California are really limited. I see that they are all usually in flat areas with a lot of jumps and not as much natural terrain. I take guys like you and I go, consider it trail riding on a bigger, wider scale.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get you out on there. And then I'm going to get you a project bike. I need to get you a project bike. I'm going to build you something.
I think both of those ideas are awesome. I need to do more. I haven't actually put in any real laps at a track. And that's a whole another podcast episode, but I think I'm going to take you up on that maybe this winter and come down there and do some fun stuff.
That'll be great.
If you got a bike because I have bikes, but I think I'd probably be better.
I'll have a bike.
Be better on one of your bikes.
Yeah, I'll have 2 or 3 to choose from.
Set up. So no, that's awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. I think that I've learned a ton from this. I think it should be pretty interesting for a lot of our other guests or our listeners. That is, and one of the things I love about your YouTube channel is there's no BS on this. Jay has. If he's talking about something, if it's an oil or if it's a product or whatever, these are not things he's just willy-nilly. He's going out and he's doing the testing, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I always agree with 100% with what you're saying, but I can respect that you've put in the time and the effort that this is what you believe, and you're not wrong. You know what I mean? And I love that. I love the fact that you'll shoot from the hip and say, hey, here's something that we are noticing because I'm riding a lot, I'm doing these things. And so I applaud that. I love the fact that it's no nonsense and there's a lot of value to be learned. Even just like you've had videos on oils and chemicals and stuff. And I think that there's a ton of cool stuff in there.
That's great. Well, I appreciate it, man. And I obviously enjoy your stuff. So it's been fun. And we can get out riding.
Okay, let's do it. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you later.